How will the Jacksonville Jaguars replace DJ Chark's targets for the remainder of the season? Is it time to bench Miles Sanders against a tough Panthers defense? And how strong of a case is Kirk Cousins making to be in FFPC lineups in Week 4? Plus, a former FFPC league champ and Week 1 main event leader Silas Dain hangs out to discuss Kyle Pitts, Dak Pascal, and Jamal Williams, plus much more. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
I can't stand the pressure. I've seen greater men than these lessons make out of the messes.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now listening to the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com, with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here's Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Hey, thank you so much, Rob, and thank you to the Quiet Hollers. Remember to check out their music at quiethollers.com. Greetings and salutations, all of you Balkaholics and Ferrelliacs. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com. I am, of course, as always, your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. Farrell, we usher in October. It doesn't seem that long ago that you and I were hanging out in Louisville. We were hanging out in Las Vegas. And now all of a sudden it's getting real because we got 25% of the season done. And I certainly wouldn't encourage anybody to make any rash decisions. But the season is cooking along here, and you sort of got to make hay while the sun shines. How are your teams doing as we hit, not the quarter pole, because the quarter pole is the last quarter of the season, but how are your teams looking as we hit the first 25% of the season?
Personally, Balky, my teams are, I have one outlier that's actually doing pretty well in football, guys, and a bunch of others that are a blast to play, but needed some work on the waiver wire this week, and I joined probably all of our FFPC and KFFSC players in working that waiver wire, and I played more teams than I ever had, so it was a lot of work. Guys that benefit from working every year, Balky, in fantasy football, and I need to give them a shout-out because today, before the show, I checked out the FFPC leaderboard that I had taken a bookmark before Thursday night's games, and I saw that our 2020 champion from the KFFSC,
yes, sir.
FPI, used their one of many bids, used their bids that the KFFSC awarded to them and have navigated after week 3 into third place. Petri and Larson, Brad and Darren, they are off to a good start in not only the FFPC but here in Kentucky.
This is why you listen to the show, because not only are Petri and Larson in third place overall in the FFPC main event, you heard them probably less than a month ago on these airwaves telling you who to draft, who not to draft, their sleepers and busts and everything, and now they're third place for $500,000. Not only do we have them in third, but former guests of the show, Danny Mueller and Ron Meyer, co-owners of the second place overall team in the FFPC main event right now, just ahead of Petri and Larson, which is phenomenal that we have those guys in second place with the reigning KFFSC champs in third place. Which is awesome. And like you said, Farrell, Frying Pan Inc. doing very, very well, trying to repeat as the overall champs in the KFFSC main event. That's awesome. And I certainly don't want to give them short shrift tonight. What I do want to acknowledge tonight, and maybe I'm the only person who realizes this, but I'm going to tell you this right now. Starting tonight, this is the 1-year anniversary of KFFSC Commissioner Farrell Elliott being the official co-host of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Farrell, you have officially made it a year. Congratulations on that anniversary, my friend. You're in the annals now. I mean, this is legit. And I'll say this too. I have had a lot of high stakes owners come up to me in Louisville. I had a lot of them come up to me in Vegas and saying how much they are enjoying the podcast with you and I now co-hosting it. It's been a year, and according to the sample size, you are crushing it, my friend. So congratulations and thank you.
Well, thank you, Balky. I would think after a year I would have gotten a little better, though. It's really been a year. Well, it's been a good part of the year, and I've enjoyed it.
It's been great, and I thank you for coming on. This has been awesome. Coming up on tonight's show to celebrate Farrell's anniversary, we're going to discuss C.J. Uzoma's huge Thursday night performance. I got an email from next week's Road of His High Stakes Lowdown guest about C.J. Uzoma that is really helping him out in the Pros versus Joes leaderboard. We'll get to that later on, but we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about Zach Moss's emergence in the Buffalo backfield. Hudson Kern-Reeve, who's hanging out in the chat room, already has a question about him. We'll get to that. And then, of course, Silas Dain, former FFPC league champ, who is the leader in the FFPC main event after week one. This is his first and only entry ever in his career into the main event, and he was leading everybody after week one. We're going to talk to him in roughly 10 minutes or so. He's going to hop aboard. We're going to talk about the main event. We're going to talk about Marquise Brown, whether he's an every week start at this point, and how Silas ended up with such a receiver-rich team in his 12th FFPC live auction squad, plus much more. Shout out to the chat room right now. Feel free to post any questions you might have in there. We got Kevin Williamson, we got Dave Gerzak, John Terry, Hudson Reeve, all hanging out, plus more in the chat room right now. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, the show is at HSFFR. I am at Eric Balkman. You can always learn more about Farrell's Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. Facebook at Facebook.com/HSFFR. And if you want to chime in and talk with us, we encourage that type of behavior. 347-426-3682. That's 347-426. Beg your pardon. 347-GAME OVER. You can also email the show, highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. If you have any questions for me, for Farrell, or for Silas, send them in now. We'll try to get to all the chat room questions, tweets, and emails in the fantasy feedback segment later on in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend, Bryce, and our producer, mutual friend, Rob. By the way, Bryce is doing the show remotely from New York City tonight, which is a huge shout out to him. Thank you so much, Bryce, for that, which is awesome. All right, let's get into it tonight, ladies and gentlemen. All the nuts and bolts, everything going on that you need to be concerned about for week 4 in the FFPC. Ryan Tannehill says he has a ton of confidence in wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and I think I'm pronouncing this right. This is according to ESPN.com. Now, we already know A.J. Brown is out for week 4. We know Julio Jones is out for week 4. Westbrook-Ikhine had 25 pass routes last week, 4 catches, 4 targets, 53 yards. He also, it could have been a better day because he had a pass interference call that set up a Jeremy McNichols touchdown. Ryan Tannehill, the dude who's throwing the ball to him, quote, he does the dirty work for us. By the way, Westbrook-Ikhine, 144 catches, 2,200 yards, and 16 touchdowns in 4 seasons at Indiana University. Back to Tannehill. He gets in there and blocks. He's physical. He's tough. He's a versatile guy who has size and strength and who's made some big plays for us. I have a ton of confidence in Nick. Now, you know, that aside, we know that the players are going to stick up for their teammates and everything like that. But no Julio Jones, Farrell, no A.J. Brown, and now week 4 you get the Jets. Josh Reynolds, I haven't seen the latest on him if he's going to be back for week 4. But you look at Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and by the way, John Terry's in the chat room right now, was talking him up on the Road of His High Stakes Lowdown this week, a guy that he was looking at in waivers this week. You look at Westbrook-Ikhine, is this a guy for anybody who has him available in their leagues that could pick him up on Sunday morning? Is this a guy you look at starting against the Jets with no A.J. Brown and Julio Jones?
Oh, I think he is, Balky, especially if you played into the idea that you would have an A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, or Tannehill stack involved. And some people did that. And this is a very good player. He came out in a COVID year, and I think he is the A perfect example of a player that, with an active combine, with scouts visiting campuses, this player would not have been available as a free agent. So an undrafted free agent, tip of the cap to John Sage down at Tennessee. He's their director of college scouting. Fantasy players should look at what the Tennessee Titans do when they sign undrafted players, because if they can get a player like this to come join the team, they've made a very, very good selection, and they're developing talent. This is what you love from a team. This player is ready to step up and do it. And like a lot of physical receivers, he's 6'2", 215. He put a lot of that weight on in college. Like physical receivers, they're being defended by these corners, especially guys that are giving up several inches in height, by holding penalties, by pass interference. I'm so glad you bring up the fact that he drew the PI in a very critical position. We're having the situation all across the league. People are wondering why Pitts is not catching a lot of passes down in Atlanta. Well, he's being interfered with. Same thing with Claypool. That's why Claypool's nursing a few injuries. It's because they're just beating and taking a racking to his body. But I digress. Your question about Nick is, should you have him in the lineup? Yes, you should put him in the lineup at a flex position and count on getting at least 15 points this weekend.
You know, Farrell, that's great advice, because I look at FantasyMojo.com, run by Darren Armani. Shout out to @FantasyMojo on Twitter, and look at what the high-stakes players did with NWI, as Dave Gerzak is making me call him right now. He was added in 609 leagues. This is FFPC high-stakes leagues, Football Guys Players Championship, main event, so on and so forth. Minimum bid of 1, a maximum bid of 210, which means his median bid to pick this guy up, only $22. He's probably out there in a lot of leagues right now, and if you're looking for receiver help, we already talked about Brown being out. There's some Steelers issues, so you may need a receiver this week. You look at NWI for Tennessee. He might be out there in your league, and you could probably get him cheap on Sunday morning. He got the KFFSC commish stamp of approval. He's certainly getting the bulky stamp of approval. NWI is a guy you need to look at for Sunday morning waivers for sure. Let's talk about the Thursday night game last night. Obviously not a lot of Super Bowl implications for this game, Farrell, but a lot of fantasy implications. And one of the big winners in Thursday night's game between the Jaguars and Bengals was Laviska Shenault. He gets 7 targets. He snares 6 of them for 99 yards. He also had an 11-yard rush. Now, this is interesting because I think it was on the opening series. DJ Chark gets rolled up by one of his offensive linemen. He breaks his ankle, conceivably out for the season. Now, 52 yards of Laviska Shenault's 99 came on a Hail Mary. Well, not a Hail Mary, but a deep pass where Shenault beat Trey Waynes on that play. Shenault was, you think of him as a running back, a quasi running back, and a guy who catches or gains a lot of yards after the catch, but a lot of air yards tonight. And you look at what is going to happen with this Jacksonville offense with no DJ Chark, again, probably for the remainder of the season, maybe for good. He might have played his last game for Jacksonville since he's a free agent. But it's Shenault and it's Marvin Jones. Farrell, how much are you bumping up not only Shenault but Marvin Jones when you look at who to start week to week in this Jaguars offense now that you know there's no DJ Chark?
A lot of things going on there, Balky. And first of all, you had it right. Almost all of Trevor Lawrence's passes are Hail Marys at this point in time. So that's understandable. You had that exactly right. Laviska Shenault was a player that I targeted to get in the lineup wherever I could this week. He is essentially a running back playing wide receiver in this offense. He's 6'1", 230 pounds. That's his listed weight. I think he's probably a little bit closer to 240. He was a 4'6" guy at the combine, and that is his play speed until he starts running downhill. He's a bubble screen guy. That's how they started their game. He has nothing in common. Absolutely nothing in common with DJ Chark, and he would have probably had a bigger game if Chark had stayed on the field, because this is your underneath guy. I tell you what, you got to be a brave player to play those Cincinnati Bengals underneath with the kid Williamson from Wyoming playing middle linebacker for him, number 55. But yes, this is a player that you should have in your lineup every week going forward. Marvin Jones is going to get the pickup in the deeper passing game, the longer passing routes over the middle. That's where your DJ Chark is going to get where those targets are going to end up. But I just can't say enough about how these receivers need to help this quarterback, Lawrence, and Chenault needs to look to Marvin to learn a little more about how to play the position. They are not sharp. They round off routes. They don't come out sharp and crisp on their routes. There's problems about that. The announcers brought that up last night. But Chark, he's got a lot of football in front of him. He turns 23 years old next week. I think he's looking at a very big season for all the drafters. That anyone that's got him is going to be rewarded for his play.
Jay Flake, who will be joining me on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown next week, was talking up C.J. Uzomah to me last night in our email exchange. And he said, because this was a guy that Jay drafted in the 2021 FFPC Pros versus Joe's competition, and he said, this is a guy that could get me back up to first place. And you look at him, only rostered in 6.4% of FFPC leagues. I mean, this is a guy who was probably cut in a lot of leagues last night, or not last night, but this season so far. But last night, Farrell, 5 catches, 95 yards, and 2 touchdowns in their win over the Jaguars. Now, for what it's worth, we do believe with the mini bye here, T. Higgins is probably coming back against the Packers in Week 5. So, but Uzomah still had to contend with targets from, Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase, who had nice nights. And you look at his best yardage in a game prior to this was 29 yards. He gets 95 last night. 22-yard touchdown, 31-yard touchdown, and the secondary had a lot of problems tackling him in there. Now, Burrow had played a part into this because both of the passes that Burrow got to Uzomah were perfect. They were great. And this is more of a commentary on Burrow, who won me some money on player props last night, which was great. This plays into Uzomah as well. But you look at the Packers defense, which has been giving up a lot of fantasy points to tight ends this week or this season so far, Farrell, and you get Uzomah coming in there. Again, we probably think Higgins is going to be active, but this is a guy who's got to be rostered a lot more than just 6% of FFPC main event leagues.
Oh, yeah, Bucky. I drafted him early, and I gave up on him just because this is a perfect example of why I think this coach has been 6-26 in the last 2 years. Now, he couldn't help the fact that the player had a torn Achilles last season. There's nothing you could do about that. The previous season, I didn't think he was targeted enough, and he wasn't on the field enough. But what he's done with Burrow, and it doesn't matter about who's coming back, what you saw in the game last night with Burrow is that he's developed trust. And he's developed a connection with this player. And this player is a physically gifted tight end, big, move player, 6'6". I mean, you haven't seen a player that size move like that since Gronkowski in his prime, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, this is a team that we're still finding out about. We're still developing. And that second half that they put on the field last night, yes, it was against Jacksonville, but that was the team they had to play. That was the team they had to turn the momentum around and come back and do well on. And if you stayed with the broadcast, you learned that Burrow said something very enlightening. He said, last year we wouldn't have come back in the second half and won this game. And the announcers, they all perked up. And he said, yeah, because he said we would have gone in that locker room and we would have fallen apart. We wouldn't have believed in ourselves. We now have some free agents that came over to this team, developed us a little swagger, developed us how to fight through a 60-minute game. I think he's talking about all the guys on defense, Hendrickson, Hilton, Eli Apple, not one of my favorite players, but he does play with a lot of swagger. My point is that new guys are going to step up. Guys have to step up in this offense. There's plenty for everyone here. And, anyone that had this player, if you hung on to him, good job, and people are going to enjoy spending some money next week on the waiver wire. Those fat budgets will be ever decreasing as drafters go out to get CJ.
That's what I love about best ball leagues, because the leagues I drafted CJ Uzomah, and I couldn't have cut him, and now he's earning me points, which I love. We have Silas Dain, the Week 1 leader in the 2021 FFPC main event, in his first ever foray into the main event, coming up in just a minute here. Before we get to Silas, Farrell, you brought it up. Rob Gronkowski this week, he's doubtful in his return to Foxborough to take on the New England Patriots. According to Jeff Howe, who covers the Buccaneers for The Athletic, Gronkowski is going to have to play through, quote, extreme pain if he's going to be going to play against his old team this week. He is listed as doubtful. You think he's going to play at all? What are the chances? I mean, is it just basically what it says, a 1 in 4 shot of playing, or do you think it's better than that?
I think they're being truthful with us. We talked all along about the training room, the stars, are the true stars behind the scene in the NFL, and so it will probably be a game time decision as they work with the tight end and try to get him in position to play. You know that this player wants to play in this game badly. So we'll just have to see. I think anyone who has been through playing multiple teams in the FFPC could not avoid the bullet of losing players early in the game. It's happening to everybody, and it tears your heart out when it happens. I don't think anyone wants to take that risk. It sounds like that Gronkowski, as always, will try to toughen it up and play. But you know what? He's going to get hit when he gets out on that field, and he just might not be able to go, even if he shows up for starting the game.
There's a lot to worry about, Farrell. You mentioned the issue of re-injury and the fact that they play Sunday night this week. So Unless you have a Cameron Brate, unless you have an O.J. Howard, a Hunter Henry, perhaps on Monday night a Jared Cook, somebody like that, or even a Donald Parham, it might just be best to stay away from Rob Gronkowski this week and play somebody else and not have to wait until that Sunday night game. I apologize to our guest, Silas Dain. We will get to you in 1 second, the Week 1 leader in the 2021 FFPC main event. Final thing I want to bring up here, Farrell, the Elijah Mitchell and the San Francisco 49ers situation in the backfield. According to Kyle Shanahan, Mitchell's availability, who is dealing with the shoulder injury, is in limbo. Matt Barrows covers the San Francisco 49ers. He tweeted this out. Remember, Elijah Mitchell did not play this past week. He's been limited all week in practice. And obviously, if he is active, you probably got to bench Trey Sermon. I don't know what you do with Elijah Mitchell, and I don't think you could play any other 49ers running back, even against the Seattle defense. Farrell, how are you handling this for the 49ers backfield this week? And again, this is going to be a recurring theme on this show. The 49ers play in the late game this week, a 4:05 p.m. Eastern start, so you kind of got to wait on it. What are you doing with the Niners running backs, man?
Oh, I had Mostert early, and I backed him up with Mitchell late, and I felt just fine. And now I don't. And, the San Francisco 49ers, as far as fantasy football goes, everything's in limbo. Ayuk's in limbo. Lance is in limbo, although we told everyone what you were going to get was exactly what you see down at New Orleans with their dual quarterback situation. So, matter of fact, Lance, I'm beginning to see him dropped in occasional leagues, and it'd be on the waiver wire next week. So, I'm staying away from this. Deebo Samuel is my play here. Even our elite tight end is banged up for this game against Seattle. And I know everyone is tempted because Seattle gives up the ground yardage to the running backs. But I think since we do not have bye weeks in play here in Week 4, I think your best move is to move somewhere other than San Francisco.
Well, our best move on this show right now is to bring in tonight's guest. He has been playing high-stakes fantasy football for more than a decade, and while 2021 does mark his first entry ever into the FFPC main event, he's been playing a ton of the FFPC ancillary leagues over the years. He's obviously had a lot of success in the Super Bracket tournament, and his favorite, the high-stakes auction leagues, which we will get into, I promise you, before the next half hour is over. After Week 1 this season, he led all other comers in his first ever year in the 2021 FFPC main event. Please welcome the pride of Canada, the mayor or the governor, I don't know how it works in Saskatchewan, but the pride of Canada onto the program. It is Silas Dain. Silas, thanks so much for doing the show this week, man.
How you guys doing?
We're doing good. So here's the thing. The first question I want to ask you, Silas, the photo that we tweeted out from the FFPC, the HSFF Hour, and my accounts the photo we included in the FFPC email that went out this week was you, I'm assuming at some sort of barbecue joint. We saw the barbecued chicken. We saw the ribs. We saw the brisket. We saw the mac and cheese. We saw everything on there. Tell us the story behind that. And number two, did you end up eating that whole thing and winning yourself a T-shirt or your name on the wall of some barbecue restaurant in Canada? What's the story behind that, man? one half of Team Kimura, who is a former guest on this show, Chris Holland from Singapore, Earth, which is awesome to always have him on this podcast. It was awesome to wish him a happy birthday tonight. We will be back next Friday at 10/9 Central. Your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com. It was broadcast live and heard around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Yeah, just to show you where everybody's allegiances lie in the HSFF Hour chat room right now, Dave the Dizzle Gerzak, his daughter attends Notre Dame, whose starting quarterback played for the University of Wisconsin last year, and Jack Cohn. He helped the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, despite being 6.5-point dogs on a neutral field in Soldier Field, Chicago, Illinois, which to me is a home field for Notre Dame over Wisconsin. Jack Cohn helped Notre Dame to kick the Badgers' tails in by 3.5 touchdowns. Kevin Williamson, the Bourbon City baller himself, is definitely rooting for the Badgers tomorrow. This is a huge game because if the Badgers drop to 1-3 with a borderline 5-star quarterback at the helm who's been turning the ball over like it's a bodily function, it's a bad situation. But I'm not looking at it from that standpoint. I'm going to get up early tomorrow. I'm going to get some work done on the drive down to Madison, which is about 2 hours or so, have some good coffee, and take in the game starting at 11. We got some free tickets to a pregame free tailgate, which is right outside Camp Randall, which is going to be awesome, and get some bratwurst and get a couple of cold ones in my system before I take in the game. And whatever happens, happens. I'm just excited that I get to go see the game. It's been well over a decade since I've seen a Badgers game in person, so I'm definitely psyched up for that. And I wish you all nothing but the best in Week 4. Hopefully the ball bounces your way. And like I said, we'll be back next Friday. Farrell, me, 10/9 Central. Join us here. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for listening, everybody. Enjoy your weekend.